It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'm your host this morning. Thank you for joining with us. Got an exciting program for you this morning. We are going to dish the truth on a couple of areas that I think are important for us to understand what's happening in our nation. Our first segment this morning is going to cover the issue of John Boehner. John Boehner, Speaker of the House, has come out and basically stated that he plans to short-term fund in a continuing resolution the government coming up in the fall because he's basically telling the other representatives that there's no reason to continue to fight against Obamacare, and it's not optional that they fight back using funding as a measure or a method to prohibit further limitations on Obamacare, as an example. And I got to tell you that's deeply disturbing because Boehner is supposed to represent the people, not necessarily. And he's up until now he's been consistently saying, I'm going to stand outside of this. I'm not going to get involved. Sorry, sir, that is your job to get involved. And now we see what side of this you're going to come down on. And you're going to come down on the administration side. And this just begs the obvious question. What does somebody have on Boehner? I mean, really. Our second segment is going to be talking about the new NSA review board that's been created. And it's loaded up with Washington insiders, not the least of which is Cass Sunstein. And I got to question the idea of whether or not you want a review board that has Sunstein sitting on it. This guy is about as dangerous a person as we can come and look for, because what Sunstein has talked about in the past is actually very, very dangerous stuff. I mean, he's the guy who recommends that the government provide infiltration teams, if you will, to go in and try to disturb blogs and act as, trolls out on the internet. And he also wanted, this is interesting, he wanted, if you were a conservative blog, he wanted the government to force you to have a pop-up window that would offer opposing links to go to Democrat or liberal blogs to compare your views. I mean, he's the nudge king, right? Nudge by social engineering. So we're going to talk a little bit about him. He's not the only one on the board who's questionable, by the way. The Obamacare Army is our third segment, and that is the new army and the new weapon of the HHS related to Obamacare and how that is going to work against us. And then our fourth segment is going to cover the new revelation of a secret monitoring station that is run on behalf of Western intelligence, run by the GCHQ. That's the UK's NSA equivalent. And the info is then shared between Western democracies, quote unquote. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. You see, what we're doing is we are basically at this point so imperialistically dealing with the rest of the world by abusing, frankly, the privilege that we have as a leader on the face of the planet, that we're making enemies as fast as we can get them. So, all right, let's get into this because we've only got a half hour to cover this. Boehner is strongly recommending in a conference call with rank-and-file House Republicans that the upcoming continuing resolution will not be a do-or-die fight over Obamacare spending. So now you know where Boehner stands on this. He's been withholding his position, not trying to talk about where he stands. And the reason is obvious. He didn't want his constituents to have an opportunity to come back and say, hey, you're out of line. Not to mention the fact that as the Speaker of the House, he's the most important representative in the House. And, of course, the problem with that is that, only his own constituency can apply pressure to him. You can call him and say, as the Speaker of the House, even though I may not necessarily be in Ohio, which is your home state, you represent me effectively because you are the Speaker of the House, and he will ignore your call. So this just goes to show you the depth of depravity of the entire congressional body that is up there in Washington, D.C. Here's what Boehner says. Our intent is to move quickly on a short-term continuing resolution that keeps the government running and maintains current sequester spending levels. This is, here's what he says about Obamacare. We will also continue to implement the plan to stop Obamacare, as I outlined last month. Hey, Boehner, the only way to accomplish that is to defund it, because the thing is moving ahead at breakneck speed, and we all know that the end of the line is only a quarter of a mile away. And the only way to stop this is to defund it. But now you're telling the other reps that you're not going to tolerate, and you won't even bring up a vote. The delays the administration has been forced to implement in the health care law have given us a golden opportunity to talk about fairness. We're sick and tired of talk. How about some action, sport? Quote, if big business gets relief from the president's health care law, families and small businesses should too. This strikes a chord with Americans. When people hear it, it resonates. The president has already signed 7 bills delaying or repealing parts of his health care law. We're going to keep the pressure on the president and Senate to act on the delay bills that passed the House in July with significant bipartisan support. You may have seen Shelley Moore Capito do this on Saturday's GOP weekly address. We're going to keep holding votes that chip away at the legislative coalition the president is using to force Obamacare on the nation. All right. They've already passed 40 separate bills in the House to kill, block, repeal, or otherwise stall Obamacare. And none of it has worked, because the minute that it gets to the Senate, Harry Reid, the other lord of the manor, stops anything from moving forward on his floor, on his House floor. And so what we've got is these consistent and continuously over and over and over the same nonsense from the same people, where we are always in a position where we, as a collective group of Americans, lose. You see, these guys don't really want the blockage of Obamacare. I don't know what they've got on Boehner, but somebody's got something on this guy. I mean, it's impossible for him to be this deleterious and malfeasant in his actions. Really, it is. He's going to block the shutdown, and he tells the GOP they've got to fund the government. I'm going to read you something that I think is extraordinarily important. I got this book by Levin, Liberty Amendments, and we can have another discussion for another day about whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, and that's not today's topic. But he does have a quote in here from Ben Franklin that I want you to hear, because it's extraordinarily important, and it's very, very crucial to understanding where we are today and how Congress is operating. This particular quote is fairly long, so just bear with me. This was Ben Franklin on June 2nd at the Constitutional Convention, 2 days after it convened, right? And he's talking here about legislators and pay and executive officers and so forth and so on. Listen to what he has to say. Sir, there are 2 passions which have a powerful influence on the affairs of men. These are ambition and avarice, the love of power and the love of money. Separately, each of these has great force in promoting or prompting men to action. But when united in view of the same object, they have in many minds the most violent effects. Place before the eyes of such men a post of honor that shall be at the same time a place of profit, and they will move heaven and earth to obtain it. The vast number of such places it is that renders the British government so tempestuous. The struggles for them are the true sources of all of those factions which are perpetually dividing the nation, distracting its councils, hurrying sometimes into fruitless and mischievous wars, and often compelling a submission to dishonorable terms of peace. And of what kind are the men that will strive for this profitable preeminence through all of the bustle of cabal, the heat of contention, the infinite mutual abuse of parties, tearing to pieces the best of characters? It will not be the wise and the moderate, the lover of peace and good order, the men fittest for the trust. It will be the bold and the violent, the men of strong passions and indefatigable activity in their own selfish pursuits. These will thrust themselves into your government and be your rulers. And these too will be mistaken in the expected happiness of their situation, for their vanquished competitors of the same spirit and from the same motives will perpetually be endeavoring to distress their administration, to thwart their measures, and render them odious to the people. That's the first section of this. And I got to tell you, his points literally could be used and taken today to describe what is going on in the House and the Senate. These people no longer represent us, and they are here merely to engender their own ego, to embed their own pocketbooks with profit, to raise their own level of power, their own level of money. This is avarice. This is greed. This is ambition. And this is pride. And the problem is that when they go for the fall, we're all going with them. You see, that's the real challenge here. When men of power, men of leadership position fall, they don't just fall on themselves. They take everyone else with them. And in the case of a corporate head, they may only damage their corporation. In the case of a government, they take down the entire nation. And that's where we stand today. These people are taking us down with them. In their search, in their seeking of power and position, and for all intents and purposes, many of them have got to have been compromised. Otherwise, why would you have people like Lindsey Graham and McCain out there? We're going to talk about those guys later. I mean, there is no way that these people can be all uncompromised. There's too many of them, and we know that there's way too much happening where their files are being looked at and reviewed. Then he talks a little bit about salaries, Franklin does, and how these people are supposed to be dealt with. And hear this out, because remember now, your House rep makes about $175,000 a year as a base salary, and your federal senator makes about $195,000. Not to mention unlimited perks, and you know their actual packages are worth probably $250,000 apiece. Besides these evils, sir, though we may set out in the beginning with moderate salaries, we shall find that such will not be of long continuance. Reasons will never be wanting for proposed augmentation, and there will always be a party for giving more to the rulers, that the rulers may be able in return to give more to them. Hence, as all history informs us, there has been in every state and kingdom a constant warfare between the governing and the governed, the one striving to obtain more for its support, and the other to pay less. And this has alone occasioned great convulsion, actual civil wars, ending either in the dethroning of the princes or in the enslaving of the people. Generally, indeed, the ruling power carries its point, the revenues of princes constantly increasing, and we see that they are never satisfied, but always in want of more. The more the people are discontented with the oppression of taxes, the greater the need the prince has of money to distribute among his partisans and pay the troops that are to suppress all resistance, and enable him to plunder at pleasure. There is scarce a king in 100 who would not, if he could, follow the example of the Pharaoh. Get first all the people's money, then all their lands, and then make them and their children servants forever. It will be said that we don't propose to establish kings. I know it. but there is natural inclination in mankind to kingly government. It sometimes relieves them from aristocratic domination. They had rather have one tyrant than 500. It gives more of the appearance of equality among citizens, and that they like. I am apprehensive, therefore, perhaps too apprehensive, that the government of these states may in future times end in a monarchy. But this catastrophe, I think, may be long delayed, if in our proposed system we do not sow the seeds of contention, faction, and tumult by making our posts of honor also places of profit. You know, we have a series today of examples before us of the utter and complete lack of integrity, honor, honesty, and fairness that pervades Washington, D.C. in every respect. And people like Boehner are the ones who are making this example so blatant and obvious to us. And when we hear people like Boehner speak, and we hear them take sides against that which they promoted and ran for, as an example, when they were running for office, we hear it from many, many folks. McCain, we hear it from the likes of Lindsey Graham. These guys operate completely in opposing viewpoint to what they ran on and how they classify themselves. They call themselves a Republican or a conservative. They don't follow Republican ideals, and they don't follow conservative ideals. So what does that make them? I mean, who exactly is it that John Boehner works for? Does he work for the citizens of his state and the citizens of the United States as a representative, truly interested in doing what's right for the American people? Or does he work for the government? Because if he works for the government, then he's no longer a representative. Then he's an overseer. And the difference is clear and stark. And you don't have to be, brilliant or you don't have to be a political science major to see the problems that we have. He's concerned about sequester and threatening that, if we don't continue to fund the government, it will work towards sequester. I mean, look, the arguments by Boehner are so far outside the scope of reality. It just goes to show you that these people have so surrounded and insulated themselves with other like-minded individuals that have prohibited their ability to think clearly and definitively and accurately, to think with integrity, and to accurately and appropriately represent those people that they are alleged and were elected to do. See, when you are surrounded by people who think like you, who constantly feed you back your own view and have drank the Kool-Aid that you have drunk, then your views essentially become disassociated from those people who you live with. That's the problem with the 17th Amendment, where they made the Senate electable by the population versus the state legislature. See, originally the founders' concept on this was very simple. The state legislature elected a state senator or federal senator. Those senators represented the state's interests. And the legislatures had the right to tell that senator, this is how you are going to vote. But just here in Missouri is a perfect example. We see that Claire McCaskill, despite 71% of Missouri voting against Obamacare, elected to vote for it, irrespective of 71% of the constituency in the state. Now, you can't tell me that was a representative vote. It wasn't. It's impossible for one to make that argument. She represented 29% of the state and made a damning decision that really injured our entire state and our entire nation. Yet, the legislature can have no control over her because she's not elected by the legislature. She's elected by the people and accountable, therefore, to no one. She's not accountable to the legislature. They have no authority over her. And she's truly not accountable to the people. How do I know that? I'm going to give you a perfect example. I wrote a letter probably 18 months to 20 months ago to Roy Blunt. in reference to the Fast and Furious debacle that was going on at the time. I got a response yesterday. I kid you not. It came in my email, and the response was directly from his office. Now, when we talk about the issue of being responsive to your electorate, you got to wonder how that works when you've got a senator who takes 2 years to respond to a letter, respond on an issue. Here's what he says. Dear Michael, thank you for contacting me regarding Attorney General Eric Holder. Like you, I am deeply disappointed in Eric Holder's performance as Attorney General. His handling of the scandal surrounding the Bureau of ATF and explosives, Fast and Furious, and Project Gunrunner operations, and the Justice Department's order that secretly obtained journalist phone records are further examples of the failed leadership in this administration. He's talking about things that happened a month and a half ago, and yet I sent this letter to him 2 years ago, almost. While I firmly disagree with the direction Attorney General Holder has taken the Department of Justice, ultimately, the president must take responsibility for the failed policy of this administration. I mean, and he ends it with, again, thank you for contacting. So it's a non-answer. And then he sends, thank you for contacting me. Look forward to continuing our conversation on Facebook and Twitter about the important issues facing Missouri and the country. I encourage you to visit my website to learn more about where I stand on the issues and sign up for my e-newsletter. You got to be flipping kidding me. I mean, you gave me a non-answer that was purely political in nature, 22 months late, and then you're asking me to continue the conversation. There is no conversation. There's no conversation when I ask you a question and I don't get an answer back for 22 months. That does not a conversation make, sir. We are increasingly in a position where our legislative arm of our government, of the triumvirate, is so out of touch with the electorate that they have no comprehension or understanding of the day in and day out lives that we live. What concerns us? What affects us? How? What affects our industry, our jobs? What affects our income? What affects our state funding? What affects our lives in terms of health care and in terms of our dreams and hopes and desires? What affects our property rights? What affects our income? What affects our livability? What affects the pricing of our homes and the value that we've earned and been able to theoretically hold on to in preparation for retirement year? See, all of that is gone. All they're interested in is how can I, and they spend most of their time running around shuffling the cards trying to figure out how they can remain in power again for another term. We're going to take a hard break. When we come back, we're going to talk about our second topic this morning. And that is the NSA Review Board and the people who have been appointed to it by Obama. Guys, this is a scary group, and we're gonna delve into this a little bit. It's a sham organization and a sham board, as you well know. I mean, you can figure it out just by the fact that they've appointed this group. So what we're going to see is they're going to come back in 6 months with a clean bill of health for the NSA, telling us that everything that they do is 100% warranted and that you're protected, guaranteed. We'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to America's Voice Now. Please find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org, facebook.com/America's Voice Now, and also on youtube.com/America's Voice Now. We'll be back in just a moment.